Hello everybody, I'm Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. The aim of this podcast is to raise awareness about blindness, visual impairment, and disability in general, in a happy and light-hearted way. For those of you that don't know, I am blind. I was born with a condition called bilateral anophthalmia. Try spelling that one. It basically means that when I was born, my eyes didn't develop properly, so I wear prosthetics instead. The goal of this podcast is to remove some of the stigma and stereotypes around disabilities, whilst also having fun at the same time. Each week, I will be interviewing people from all walks of life, including some with hidden or physical disabilities like mine, and getting to know a little bit more about them and the lives they lead. This week, I am very excited to tell you that I will be talking to visually impaired paralympic skier, Menna Fitzpatrick. My name is Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. Hey Menna, how are you?
Hi, Evie. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. How's your day going?
Oh, it's going really well. I'm currently out in Italy racing at the World Cup finals, so just spent my day off sightseeing in some of the places just over the border in Slovenia, which has been lovely.
Oh my God, that sounds amazing. But like World Cup finals, that's brilliant. But I would imagine that those days off are super important then, because I would imagine that that is a really, kind of busy and chaotic thing to be a part of.
Yes, it definitely can be. We only have a couple of days off in I think it's about 9 days of racing, which can be quite a busy schedule for sure. So it's nice to finally get some time off.
Yeah, I can totally imagine. So to begin with then, can you tell me a little bit about your VI condition?
Yeah, so I was born with congenital retinal folds, which is basically almost described as if you had two pieces of paper, and the top one is kind of crinkled or folded over the macula, which takes in all the detail. I have a good and a bad eye basically as well. My right eye is a bit better, so I can see about 5%, but the left eye doesn't really have any useful sight. I can just see a bit of colour difference, and that's about it. How about yours? What's yours like?
So mine is bilateral anophthalmia, again, something that I was born with, so we're twinning there. But basically, the way I like to describe it is that, so I've got the eye socket, so my body kind of developed the eye socket, then realised it had to develop the actual eye and the optic nerve and kind of just went, nah, that's too much effort, not going to do that. So that basically meant that I was born with literally just the eye socket. And then I now wear prosthetic eyes, and I sort of get them changed sort of yearly, but it's cool because I can get whatever colour eyes I want, which is really cool.
That's pretty cool to be fair.
It is, honestly. At the minute I've got hazel, and I've always thought about changing the colour, but then I think about the fact that everyone I know would kind of go, "Why have you got different colour eyes? What?" And would be really confused about it. So that's what's slightly preventing me from doing that. But yeah, that's pretty much what my condition means.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm glad that you're able to do stuff like podcasts and stuff like that, because finding a way and finding something that you're passionate about is a great way of getting through something as well.
Yes, definitely. You've got to find those things that you enjoy, haven't you? Otherwise, you will just get insane. Speaking of, So I know that you are very passionate about skiing, so much so that you're actually a Paralympian. But like, how did your sort of journey into skiing begin?
So my journey began quite a long time ago now, almost 20 years ago. So when I was about 5 years old, my parents loved to ski and led skiing university and decided when I was about five, because I'm the youngest of three, that they wanted to give it a try and hopefully we would fall in love with the sport as well. um, and we did. It was an amazing sport to be a part of, and I just loved everything about it. So went every year on a family holiday till I was about 12, 13. I was in an indoor place in Manchester and skiing behind my dad because my dad was always my guide since I started. And they said, come along to a camp, and I've never looked back since. Been on the team ever since, raced since 13.
Wow, that's amazing. So I'm guessing then, was it just that you were skiing at that place in Manchester and someone sort of noticed your potential? Was that what kind of got you to that camp?
A mixture of both. It happened to be a talent spotting day there, with a charity called Disability Snow Sports UK, and they were actually running the development team for GB at the time. So then they said, "Oh, we've got this team. Do Are you interested? And do you fancy coming along on our October camp to Austria?" And yeah, kind of went on from there.
Gosh, I mean, that's amazing. But I've spoken to some of my guests, and when speaking to them, a common theme is the way in which their family's attitude sort of towards their disability has sort of helped shape them in a way. So you mentioned that your family were really keen to sort of get you into skiing despite your disability. So would you kind of say that your family's approach to your VI condition has in a way sort of influenced your mindset?
Yes, definitely. I would say they've been a massive massive impact for sure. I think it was my mum says that when the doctor first said that I was visually impaired, and what life may be like, he said you've got two options. You can either mollycoddle her and she wouldn't be able to necessarily live on her own, be independent, and have the same life as you have, or you can basically let me fall over and wait 5, 10 seconds to see if I would be able to pick myself up again on my own and build that resilience and that independence. And they ran with the with the second option for sure, and they had to really hold back friends and family and basically say, no, just leave her alone and like let her have 5, 10 seconds just to see if I could. And then that's made me the independent person today and have that resilience and that fight and say, do you know what? I can do things myself and I can do it. And that's definitely what they went with. And yeah, I did need a bit of help with English or reading when I was younger, or so they did give me the help when I needed, but it was just giving me those skills to be independent.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important thing to be able to do as well. I think just because the child has a visual impairment, and it's definitely the same for me, they are still a normal kid. And they should still sort of be treated as a normal kid. And so I think that's really important that your parents, sort of did that. But would you say then that the way you were sort of brought up to kind of be independent, were you quite a fearless child?
My mum and dad said yes, definitely. I just wanted to do the same as my sisters or like outdo them in some way, and that sibling rivalry, I think really instilled my competitiveness, and that's exactly why I got into sport, because it was thrilling. Skiing was just a feeling that you couldn't get from anywhere else, because for me, skiing is freedom, and it's when I can basically choose my own line, because I'm not tethered to a guide like in cycling or running. It's completely separate. You're making the choice to follow your guide's instructions, and it's all about your choice and the wind through your hair, and it's just an amazing feeling. And the feeling of going fast is just absolutely amazing, and thankfully with the relief of crossing the finish line as well, all comes together, and yeah, it's such an amazing feeling.
Gosh, yeah. I mean, I can totally imagine. But you talked earlier about that independence and that resilience that your parents kind of instilled in you. I mean, I can totally relate to that. And I don't know about you, but I think that that resilience is something that a lot of people with disabilities have sort of naturally built into them. I think we have to be, because sometimes we have to adapt. Sometimes we have to find different ways of completing everyday tasks that an able-bodied person might not have to. And so I think that that resilience is something that we really rely on and really have to learn. Would you say you feel the same?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, we go through tough times, and like for me, school was quite difficult because like going out in the playground and seeing masses of people wearing exactly the same uniform, and you can't tell who's who, so you can never find your friends in the playground, like you, and then you all that builds and builds and builds, and it does. Yeah, you have to be resilient and not let that affect you as well at the same time. And yeah, we have to have talking like talking phones or technology out there that you can actually adapt so much to live an almost able-bodied life. And some of the disabilities aren't quite like that, but everybody on the skiing circuit has shown their resilience, and has got to the start line with had some sort of challenge to overcome, which is just amazing, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that you love that sort of freedom of skiing. What kind of other aspects do you love about it?
It's just amazing. It's hard to describe. Um, just being able to call the mountains my office pretty much, be out in the fresh air, being able to give my all in a race and performance and be proud of who I am and representing my nation, and having the crowd at the bottom like screaming across the finish line, and just being able to do it as a team as well, because we've changed what's usually an individual sport of ski racing to a team sport with a guide and athlete as well. So it's even more enjoyable when you share it with somebody else.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine that that joint feeling of kind of like euphoria that you feel with your guide as you cross the finish line. I can imagine that for both of you involved, that's such a, special thing to be able to feel together. And I would imagine that that kind of brings you closer as well, both being in that moment together.
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot of hard work
Yeah.
and a lot of trust and a lot of communication goes into it. And yeah, you're on the road the whole time, pretty much for 9 months of the year, like on and off. Like so you spend a lot of time with your guide, and you have to build that trust pretty quickly. Um, so getting there, and yeah, your relationship just builds and builds and builds with every race, with every run that you don't complete, every run that you fall is always a bit of a learning curve, and every time, and that just makes you closer and closer. And then when you do win, it's such an immense feeling, and it's such an amazing feeling to be able to cross the finish line with somebody that close to you.
you mentioned about having to build up that trust really quickly, and I can imagine you totally would have to, but how does that process work? How do you start to build up that trust in your guide?
So for me, it's always the little things that matter the most. So it's getting the personalities right, and I almost know immediately, like after like the first one or two runs together, I know whether we're going to click or whether we're not, whether it's going to be a right fit, and then after you establish that, then it's working on the trust. As I said, like we'll often go and do high ropes courses, we'll go and do other team activities, we'll, even if it's just pointing out a simple curb in the middle of the road or something like that, just so simple, or a flight of stairs, or just knowing that they're thinking of how to make your life easier is one of the main things that helps build trust. And then you, when it comes to it in a speed and a downhill race, you can trust those instructions of what you get. So it does come with time, but there are little ways of building that at the very beginning.
Right, okay. So, I mean, how do you go about sort of finding a guide then?
So currently, we quite often at the moment use ex racers, so who have raced for themselves on the able-bodied circuit, just because then they know the skills, they know how the sport works, and then go from there really, and then see whether the personality is right, and so it's kind of hard to find a really good guide, and who's able to give up the time and isn't working in a job somewhere, and so it's actually quite difficult. But the ones that we have got, we're really fortunate to have. But for the development team, they're looking at guides who can be a bit more adaptable, who could go from different athletes, because the athletes aren't quite as full time. So it's interesting, sure.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. Obviously, we've just had a conversation about your guide and how that process works. But could you sort of explain how you ski, obviously with having limited sight?
Yeah, so for me, it's all about the feeling underneath my feet, and the trust in the skis, in the comms, because we've actually got Bluetooth headsets between my guide Katie and I. So she will tell me through that what's coming up, whether it goes steeper, whether it goes flat. She'll also give me cues on the course of what we're doing on there. So sometimes there's tighter gates, sometimes there's two gates that we have to go around, and rolls and all that sort of stuff. So she'll feed that back to me, and then she'll also give me a couple of cues of technique of what we're working on, just a little reminder, to help me get into the right position. And then for me, it's all about the feeling underneath my feet and whether it feels right, and I can feel when the skis are on their edges to really be clean, because clean is fast in our sport. So it's really interesting, but I can usually tell, usually by the first gate, whether it's going to go well or not.
Wow, okay. I mean, that's pretty cool, to be fair, that you can tell that quickly. But I would imagine then that you have to be so focused on what's going on around you. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, so thankfully I can see a little bit. So Katie wears a bright orange jacket, and that's pretty much all what I follow. And I like with that and the cues, and thankfully there's nobody else on the course when we race. So thankfully it's just about seeing her, where she goes in the communication, and then me literally going for it as fast as I can. basically. And then, yeah, just thankfully just have to be so focused on the little things and almost block everything else out. Otherwise, you can get, for me, I can get scared if I know there's a bump coming up or an icy patch that I wasn't quite ready for that Katie might not have said or something like that. So it's quite, you have to be quite focused and narrow on what you need to do.
Yeah, I can imagine. But like, do you ever, I mean, you are completely amazing, and there's not many people who can do what you do, but do you ever feel that sort of like adrenaline rush before a race? And do you like that rush, or do you kind of hate it?
Um, so I would say there's quite a few races where I am nervous in the start gate. Um, but my dad's always said that nerves are a good thing as long as you can as long as you can control them and they don't let it affect your run and stuff like that. Like nerves are just your body's way of preparing you for what's coming up. So I always think, okay, I'm nervous, but this is what I do. This is what I've been training for. I just think, and especially at the top of a downhill race, I do get a bit scared. It's fast, it's dangerous. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can. I've kind of got to put that fear. I almost imagine putting that fear in a little box and putting the lid on it and putting it to one side that hopefully I don't need to open until at least after the race. Once I cross the finish line, I get that feeling of adrenaline and I know whether it's fast or not. And it is an amazing feeling. And it is one that I would love to keep having for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you mentioned that sort of thing of putting your fear in a little box and chucking it to the side. Do you have any sort of other coping mechanisms that you like to, implement when you feel nervous, or do you just kind of prefer to just get on with it in a way?
A mixture of both. Um, yes, I sort of have a couple of um, things that I can do to help calm the nerves if they've gone a bit too high or and for me I love drinking tea. So one of my old psychologists said that if you picture a teacup and teacup stands for thinking calmly under pressure, and that usually calms me down, and that's like I just look at that and concentrate on that, and then I'm able to refocus after that back to the run and what I need to do at that start gate.
Right, okay. I really like that teacup analogy, to be fair. I've never heard that before, but I love that. Um, but what would you say are some of the sort of challenges that you face being a visually impaired skier?
One of my challenges for me personally is confidence. I'm such a when I'm confident, I ski really well. If I'm not confident for some reason, I ski terribly. I'm really slow. um, so it's a hard balance to get my confidence up enough for me to ski well and not be too cocky, and then to have enough to be able to produce the skiing that I need to do. So, and that all comes down to having the right training and how that goes really. If training's gone really well, confidence tends to be high, and then I can go and do that same performance. But even just like the little bits, like getting thrown in warm up by bumps, or like warm up doesn't quite go right, or my cat suit just doesn't feel quite right on that day, which happened yesterday morning. And my first run that I did yesterday was not particularly fast. But thankfully, with the team around me, my guide Katie, my ski tech Peter, my coaches all sat down and said, "You know you can do it," and gave me a little pep talk and got me feeling so much better and so much happier to then go out and actually come first from being in third position, being 2 seconds behind to being 2 seconds in front of the leader, which is absolutely amazing to for that to happen so quickly.
Gosh, yeah, I mean, that is phenomenal that you were able to do sort of that quick of a turnaround. But you mentioned sort of briefly earlier about training. So how does that process work? How do you, train for your runs and stuff like that?
Yeah, so for us, training involves spending a lot of time in Europe for sure, and we do all 5 disciplines. So we've really got to get the balance between all of them. And for us, doing speed training, doing the downhill and super G training is really important, and getting confident in that, because we don't often get a chance to train those. So when we do, it's really good to make the most of it for sure. And then you've got giant slalom and slalom, which are a bit more technical, because the gates are a lot closer together and the speed's a lot lower, but it's more technical. So you've got a big range of training that you need to do, but you've also got to find time to do lots of gym training to be really strong to withstand the forces of skiing as well. So it's definitely a full-time job. For
Yeah,
sure.
I can totally imagine. But obviously, you've kind of mentioned that you travel around a lot for your competitions and stuff. So, you know, how do you sort of navigate that? How do you, with so much traveling, how do you navigate that being visually impaired?
So I'm fortunate to live in the UK, only about 20 minutes from an airport, which is quite major, in Manchester. So that's really handy and cuts travel down quite a bit. But I have a team around me, so we often fly into the same airport and meet all together, and then travel out from there. We have a couple of team vans out here in Europe, that will have most of our stuff, like our boots, our ski gear, our skis, um, all of that stays out in Europe. And then we'll just travel with our clothes and our personal gear, which thankfully is a lot lighter. um, and then we'll all meet in one place and train there for a few weeks, and then we'll often go then to races, to stay in race hotels and stuff like that, across all of Europe pretty much.
Right, okay. So being a skier with limited sight, what kind of reactions do you get from people?
It's usually surprise for sure. It's quite nice actually, because we had people the other day actually, in the gondola whilst we were going up for our run. They saw the microphones and the bright orange jacket, and they were asking questions, and it was a wow, that's amazing. I didn't really know that was possible in a way. So I love the fact that I'm there proving that visually impaired or blind people or people with disabilities can ski and ski race just like anybody else.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really important. I think it's such a brilliant thing that you are proving that and showing people that you can do that, because as well as it being an amazing thing, it also educates people that just because people have a disability doesn't mean they can't accomplish things. So I think that's brilliant that you are doing that.
Yeah, for me, doing these interviews and going into schools and giving talks, as long as I've inspired at least one or two people to go out there and find a sport that they love, or go and follow their passion that they necessarily might not think that they can do. As long as I've done that, then I've done my job as an athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have sort of a specific routine when it comes to the day of a competition?
Um, yes and no. um, so we've got the typical. We need to do obviously breakfast, normal, like we do like a little activation warm up. So that will be involving a bit of stretching, getting the body woken up, and then we'll go into like lunges, squats, that sort of thing, just to wake all the muscles up that we need to ski really. And then we'll go into our uh, ski warm up pretty much, and we'll do one or two runs, maybe some drills, just to get everything fine tuned, get the feelings, the foot, and then we'll go and inspect the course. So we get a chance to. This is our first chance to have a look at the course and um, what the run's like, what the snow's like on the day. So you often go down in snowplow at slow speeds, getting used to the rhythm of the course. And then we'll often after the end of that, we'll go through it a couple of times, chatting through it, me and Katie, trying to visualize it and get it really stuck in your head, so you're not trying to think, oh, where am I going and stuff like that, because you don't really have time for that. Um, and then we'll go up to the top and we'll do a bit more of a warm up at the top, get your head focused and get in the zone pretty much. And then I'll get into the start gate. I'll make sure my boots done up super tight. I click my top poles about 5 times, and then me and Katie are like, yes, let's do this. And then we push out as hard as we can. So that's pretty much my start routine.
Right, okay. So, what would you say has been your proudest moment in your life so far?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I would say I've got two for this
Okay.
question. Um, I've got so back in 2018, I went to my first Paralympics at the age of 19, and we were bib number one out on our first race. So absolutely terrifying. And it was one of the speed races as well. It was the downhill. And me and my guide Jen at the time were like, right, let's go for this. Let's open the games with a bang. And I made it to the fourth gate and fell over. So that didn't really go to plan at all. But thankfully, I wasn't injured. But I then had to pick myself back up in 24 hours pretty much to go out there and go and do pretty much exactly the same race. So a Super G race, still high speed, still knowing that I've got to make it past the fourth gate for sure this time. And just getting through that finish line and winning a bronze medal was probably one of the proudest moments, because I've gone from falling and crashing and being really nervous again in that start gate the next day to putting down a run that got me the bronze medal was just amazing, to be honest. And that's one of my proudest moments, from bouncing back from that to win that was just amazing. And then my second one is again during those games on the very last day. I was pretty tired after doing 4 other races. And it was one of the turniest courses in the world. So one of the really hard courses set by my competitor. And we were just like, let's go and have some fun. We've achieved what more than what we imagined we could in our first games. Let's just go out and have fun. And I had the worst morning beforehand. A ski boot got dropped on my head. um, I was completely overwhelmed with the whole games experience. And then I was very much like, oh, what else could possibly go wrong? We couldn't inspect really the line because of really soft snow, so that was not very useful. And then we're like, okay, but you might have had the worst morning in the world, but you're here in South Korea. Let's go and have some fun on the last day. And we came down and won the gold medal. And it wasn't till after my guide started jumping on me that I knew that we got the gold medal, because she was just in shock. So she forgot to tell me what was going on. So yeah, that was also one of my proudest moments for sure.
My gosh, I mean, they both sound absolutely amazing. And being in the same Paralympic Games as well, I can imagine that that must have been such an incredible couple of days for you, but they both sound absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite an experience for sure. And having my family there at the bottom, experiencing all that with me was, yeah, just the tip on the iceberg, to be fair.
Gosh, yeah, I can totally imagine. So what would you say then are your aspirations for the future?
So currently we are working towards the games in Italy in 2026. So that's currently our next goal. But for after skiing, I just want to help other people find skiing and find what they're passionate about, I suppose. So I'd maybe go into like athlete mentoring or that sort of stuff.
Right, okay. I mean, that sounds amazing, and I think you'll do incredible with that. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I mean, you are so, honestly, you are so phenomenal, and there aren't many people who could do what you do and do it as well as you. So, you are such an incredible person, and I feel so privileged to, have been able to talk to you. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me as well. I think you're doing an amazing job, and spreading the word about disabilities is exactly what we need.
Thank you. I try. I really try. Whether I'm doing it well or not is another question, but I try.
Well, you're doing a good job.
Thank you. Well, thank you again for coming on the podcast, and thank you to my audience for listening, and I will see you all next time.